Welcome everyone to another episode of the Gold Silver Bitcoin Show brought to you by GoldSilverBitcoin.com. We are more than honored to be sitting down with our recurring guest, one of our main guests, R.L Bryer. I think this is the third time we've spoken. Thank you so much for coming on.
Mr. O'Connell, good to be with you today, sir. I appreciate you having me on more than once in the last month or two now, so it's good to be back with you.
Likewise. So you're looking at Bitcoin price these days. We're sitting at about $56,000+ I believe. What is your read on the Bitcoin market today?
Yeah, so the last 50 or so days, I don't know the exact number of days now, but we've been, ever since we peaked at the all-time high, it's probably about, well, we could look it up, but I think it's about 35 days now or something like that, maybe. Right around 69K, 69,044 was the all-time high. So we made that, maybe we'll just call it a month ago. And now we're sort of just trading this. We drew back, and I was fortunate. I had a feeling that we might have a drawback, even though I kind of felt like when we took out the last high, we would rock it. But once I realized that wasn't going to happen, I in my trading positions, I did manage to miss most of the pullback, and got in a metaverse play in Decentraland, getting off Bitcoin here a little bit. But now I'm gaining more confidence in where Bitcoin is. It is bumping up against overhead resistance right now and doesn't seem able to break it at 58.4, 58.5, and that's been rejected numerous times. It actually went up and touched the top of that range around 59.3, and it's been rejected there too. So it's kind of bouncing off of that. And now that we failed that, it looks like it might go back down and test 53K or maybe 52K before we spring higher, hopefully. But never financial advice. But I'm still optimistic in the long term that this. Now that we're here, I don't think the bull market's over with all the institutional investment we've seen over the last 18 months. But I'm playing it a little bit more safe right now. I'm keeping a very close eye on everything with the current the news out of the Fed and all that stuff, and just being very cautious right now is what I'd say in the short run.
69,420 is really what everybody has their eye on, it seems, at this point.
Yeah, 69,420. Everybody was hoping it would get there. It just missed. It was pretty close though. Yeah, so if we take out 69,000, I'm pretty sure we'll probably see 80K. It can still happen this year. That's not too crazy of a move for Bitcoin to make. I mean, we're getting down to it's getting down to brass tacks now. Only 28 days left in the month or something like that, 27 days. So it's going to be a steep climb if we do make it there. But I'm pretty confident in the next month at least, or maybe month and a half of price action. I do think the alts will continue to outperform, like Solana. I'm pretty bullish on Solana right now. It managed to bounce off of like the 180 range in the last week. It had a pretty steep pullback from, I think the all-time high was 259.60, and it went down to like 180 something, or right around that range. It might have wicked down into the 170s, but it bounced pretty hard when it's back. It reached back to it made it all the way back to 238 today, or 243 today. And I'm very bullish on Solana. I think we talked about Solana a little bit, and Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin vastly right now. So it's interesting to see how these alts are sort of displaying the same network effect that Bitcoin did in the early days. And they're outperforming Bitcoin, basically the Bitcoin pair.
So I want to look into this a little bit more. So stick with me here. I want to when I'm looking at these charts, for instance, I see largely a reflection of human psychology and human action as well. So it's just like one way of charting like what people and humans are doing at any given time. So that's why now we hear talk about $69,420 Bitcoin. We have on Google, there's 43,400 results for $69,420 Bitcoin. So there's some clear potentially meme power going on here. We have an article from Benzinga. Could Bitcoin $69,420 price be a signature meme event for the cryptocurrency? And essentially the article highlights that the price of Bitcoin hit an all-time high recently of $66,930. This marked a new record. The next leg up could take it to a price that has the ultimate meme potential, 69,420. So I wonder, did we actually bounce off 69,420? It's just that the smart traders, they were like, I know where this is going. It's going to 69,420. So we're going to exit here a little bit before that so that we can take our profits. The quote, price would combine two of the most popular numbers in social media in meme land and could be a big event for Bitcoin. And then there's numerous Reddit articles, like for instance, Imaginary Marsupial 38 1 month ago asked, what is the big deal with the number 69,420? Have no idea what this is. Why is it significant? Now, this kind of actually reminds me of some of the posts that went famous in on Bitcoin Talk, like when the gentleman or woman, I guess, probably gentleman, misspelled hold to hodl, and now we have hodl, for instance. There's some others that unfolded like that. So now this gentleman's or woman's fellow Redditors say, is this your first day on the internet? Some people will break it down. It's a joke of two numbers, 69 and then 420. Combined, they make 69,420. All right. So then we got another thread, 69,420 on April 20th. Kind of bearish, but I'm calling it anyway. So this was like this year, 2021. So it'll get to on Reddit. You're wrong about your $69,420 prediction. However, we've got another April 20th coming up. And I guess 69,420 is possible on that day, but I'm not making that prediction. So we got, if BTC hits 69,420 by the 4th of June this year, this gentleman, Sanasti Inc. or woman, says, I'll donate $6,489 to charity. And on. Can we reach 69,420? Redditor Dollar Bill asks. So RL, can you break down the significance of 69,420 for Bitcoin?
I think that the significance is basically, a little bit of this this meme energy that we've seen over the last year, really, with GameStop and Dogecoin and these sort of plays that people just decide to meme. And I don't know if you really count GameStop in that, but I guess you would. These sort of like meme type stocks or cryptocurrencies that you can't discount the energy in memes. We're living through a revolutionary time, Justin. So I guess it's easier to interact in some ways quickly these days with memes, and there's definitely a lot of power in it. You saw what happened with Doge and Elon. As much as I don't like much of what he's up to, or Dogecoin, but you can definitely sense that at least in certain sectors or certain segments of the population, maybe it's not the most polished investors that are running after the meme plays, but I do think that there is some power to that. So I'm all for Bitcoin getting its own meme play. I don't overall, the meme plays in Bitcoin haven't been so good. Historically it's been like have fun staying poor, things like that. So I don't mind seeing something a little more positive like that, and it's just all in good natured fun, I think. So, but yeah, I think there's actually a really good chance we still see that during this bull run or bull market. But it's very interesting. Bitcoin's only up like 190% for the last year, so we haven't had any sort of like blow off top unless we front ran this cycle, which my number all along, I've said it on your show before, was 65K. And I still consider, what is 4 or 5% kind of like a double top. So if we did peak at 69,000, I'd say that was a pretty good call from 2019. So, I'm hoping we go higher, but my ego isn't that big that I don't want us to keep making money on the way up. But I could see maybe, I still am not rolling out that we've double topped either. I think that there's a lot of people that are still major influencers on Twitter and YouTube and stuff that are all about 100K. They said it was basically virtually a certainty. And anytime that people start talking like that, you can almost guarantee that the market's not going to go that way. So I would not be shocked if we didn't get there as soon as people thought. So we're already seeing that, like the stock to flow of Plan B. I think you and I may have spoken on that before too. It hasn't quite panned out in the last 30 days. So I think that maybe like a 30-day grace period would be decent for something like that, at least. But right now it's definitely, I think he's about what, $35,000 off his where he thought we'd be in the beginning of December. So Yeah, but it's just a model. And long term, we know what's going on. We know that people want to store value in Bitcoin and get away from central banks. And around the world, you can see that they're cranking up the tyranny. All these countries in Europe are locking down. So we could what I think we could see is something similar, but maybe to what we saw with the COVID crash, where we go back down and touch 52K, or even go back and hit 48K or something like that and bounce, because of, like, right now they're pumping this new strand. I hate even talking about this, but you have to, because it's part of the market. So maybe that happens, and then Bitcoin has some sort of crazy rally like it did last time, where people realize that the world isn't ending yet, and they start to look for a safe haven again, a real safe haven. It'll be interesting.
So like, certain people argue that certain Bitcoins might be worth more than others, like those that you understand their history, where who's held them. You
Right.
can be certain that they have not been used for illicit purposes. Like whitelisted Bitcoins may there be worth more than, quote, I guess,
Dirty,
blacklisted Bitcoin, dirty
dirty Bitcoin.
Bitcoins.
Yeah.
So I guess like my question is, as an extension thereof, like, would Bitcoins bought at $69,420 be worth more than other Bitcoins?
That's a very interesting concept. I personally don't think so, but there may be some sort of niche market for something like that. I don't subscribe, honestly, to this whole dirty. I think this is sort of like a Wall Street play, in my opinion, by, like, what's his name? Mr. Wonderful O'Leary. I think he was kind of one of the first guys that I heard talking about this dirty, clean Bitcoin thing, and championing that. So I'm not buying into that dirty Bitcoin, that whole dirty. It sounds like a scam to me. Like everything pre him, or predating his entry into Bitcoin, wasn't real or something like that. But I do worry. I do think there's a um, uh, there's a sincere aspect to worrying about tainted Bitcoins, and that was written about in the Epic Cash white paper. That's a privacy coin that I'm interested in, and and I think Gregory Maxwell, or who was it? I think he might have been the first one to talk about that. The fact, don't quote me on that, so I'm not putting words in his mouth if it wasn't him, but I think it may have been him, or maybe no, it's Andreas Antonopoulos, I think, talking about tainted Bitcoins a long time ago. And it's just, all that is just like kind of what you said, that maybe somewhere along the way you got a Bitcoin, or a portion of a Bitcoin that somebody did something illegal with, maybe somewhere in the world. I mean, there's numerous laws around the world. So maybe you, somebody down the road, it doesn't mean you got it directly. You could get it indirectly, 10 sources down the road, So that is a little bit of a concern to me, fungibility, because Bitcoin isn't private. Over time, I could see nation states maybe trying to go after people that way, if they like are one of the more oppressive regimes around the world. But I think the writing is on the wall that all nation states are going to, by virtue of game theory and what we've seen so far, they're going to have to embrace it, because if they don't, it's literally like not innovating with the internet or something like that. It might be more important in the end. I think there's a good chance of that.
We're looking at kind of the stock market. It seems there's a lot of outflows, particularly by executives out of certain stocks, their stocks. I believe a number I saw trending on Twitter yesterday was $69 billion had been sold by executives recently. What's your read on that?
Yeah, the legacy market really looks like it's about to peak, or it may have. I don't know if it's crazy to try to call a top on this with the amount of money that they put into the system in the last couple of years, but I do think that the legacy market is now, what, 18 months or something like that into its longest bull run ever, at least, I think. So it's gonna end badly when it does. And I think that people like you and I that are looking for alternatives to the idiocy, honestly, of the legacy system and the centralization. I mean, it's just getting more and more outrageous, and the dichotomy between people that actually know what's going on and don't. There's just so much just the lack of education over monetary education, economic education is just insane to me. The older I get, the more I realize that it's all by design. And I think that the legacy market is set for another crash because they've done exactly what you would do if you wanted to crash the market. So they've printed all the money, they get it first, they spend it first on, or invest it first, and they're able to pull it out and put it into real things. Almost certainly that's where that money's going into real assets like gold or Bitcoin or silver, whatever. These people aren't stupid, these executives, and they're not going to tell Main Street that. They're going to keep pumping their stocks. And just like you noted, there's been a number of even CEOs. It's not just selling off stocks, but Jack Dorsey just stepped down. Who else? There's been a number of people recently stepping down from their positions. So so I think that that sort of may be a top signal across the market that something bad could be forthcoming here soon. But to call it top now, I just don't know yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know you're a big Austrian economist, and I think that it is stupefying that one does not understand that when you print 6 trillion US dollars, that it's going to lose value relative to all the other goods and services, et cetera, that are in the economy. And the notion that there's other explanations for the devaluing of the dollar that we're seeing, I think just are they're convoluted real quickly. It starts to get convoluted, and then there's all this like science and data, but it's actually quite simple. It's like,
Right.
as you stated, they print money, it goes to their partners, well, Fortune 100 companies, banks first, they buy up real assets, which then rise in value, and we get the money later on in the process. So I think farmland's another thing that is being purchased right now by the wealthy. Mm-hmm. And it's very clear that the amount of power that has been consolidated over the last 18 months has real implications for probably decades, if not centuries.
Yeah, it's very, like you noted, it's very easy to understand once you actually do the research. You have more money chasing the same non-money goods. It's literally that's all you need to know. Like you have an increase, a bunch of trash money that has no value, that was just printed, created out of debt, and it's chasing the same number of goods or less because they shut the economy down. So it's obvious what's going to happen. Prices go up and everything, they pass that on to us, onto the consumers, because and it's not the corporation's fault necessarily. I mean, it's more or less an the feds and the central banks, but it's just so we don't have much of an option other than at least doing our best to diversify. I mean, you have to hold some fiat to get along day to day, but if you're losing 15 or 20% every year, you're not going to have much fiat long term anyway. So it's a risk game now. They've turned like every single person into like a sort of a big risk on investor, because out of necessity just to survive. And then when the black swan comes or something like that, there's going to be a lot of people that get hurt because they don't take profits on the way up.
I want to get into more of that. That's very interesting. There's a lot going on right now. Like what was coming to my mind was that like right now we have like more power as individuals than ever before. Like just with social media, for instance, we're able to express ourselves and get our ideas out there. And the reason why most people don't do that or haven't embraced it yet is because they're scared to do that. And they're scared to put themselves out there, when there's literally people with millions of followers who post pictures of their leg just to like underscore how they got to where they are, and how the only thing holding you back is yourself. And so like, in short, the individual has more power than ever in some ways. And then you're talking about everyone's a risk on investor. This is what happens when you print money, when there's inflation, it results in reckless spending and waste. Everybody, this is like in the historiography, very clear, especially like, let's just say in the last 120 years. So knowing that, as you said, people are doing it out of necessity. I think that a word that might be now thrown around more in financial and economic circles is Hail Mary. I think more people are like, oh, I need a Hail Mary. Like I'm grinding and I'm not able to keep up with the rise in prices of costs and goods and services. So can you speak more about the Black Swan event and the effect it will have on those who are all of a sudden risk on investors who, I mean, either mistime the market, as is probably going to be the case in 99% of people's cases, or
Hmm.
aren't aware that they're going to add that the market ebb and flows. For instance, even if it's on the way down or on the way up, it's still going to ebb and flow in the context of those macro trends. So speak to inflation, reckless spending, black swan event.
Yeah, so basically, I'll just put it in terms of like one cycle with Bitcoin. So, for example, you and I may have been just loading up as much as we could, dollar cost averaging during the bear market, but the average investor wasn't around. And while we got in, we bought Bitcoin at 3,100 at the bottom at the last bear market, or whether we bought Bitcoin at 3,800 in March 2020 during the COVID crash, liquidity crisis that week where it dropped like 50% or whatever it was in a couple days. Um, we may have bought that dip. I did buy that dip. You probably bought some back then, and a lot of smart people were buying then. But as we've seen, as a result of the COVID crash, or whatever you want to call it, whether this was a planned thing or not, they a lot of central banks around the world injected paper money that has no backing into the economy, and people began to speculate harder than they've ever done, and that really gave rise to the meme stuff we were talking about earlier. People speculating on dog coins, and you have all this liquidity in the market that really shouldn't even be there right now in reckless things. Maybe it should be there, but it shouldn't be in dog coins. So what will eventually happen is there will be some sort of news driven event, like it always is, or basically normally is. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but some sort of event will happen. You can't say what it will be, but maybe the stock market does crash one day and it loses 20% or whatever in one day, and then another 20% the next day. Okay, so everybody will panic. They'll panic sell, and these are people coming in right now, or they bought at 65K, they bought the top, and they just get wiped out. And then they're left with virtually peanuts or whatever, because a lot of people right now are getting trading with high leverage, and just a lot of people went long on these. That's what really bothers me about these Twitter accounts and stuff and some of the biggest ones on Twitter in the Bitcoin space are all saying 188 or two whatever the number is, 225K was a certainty, and I'm sitting here thinking like, well, 65K was looking pretty good at 3,100, and they pumped a lot of money into the market. So we're at a very risky point in time, in my opinion, especially with the cycle. I'm sticking with Bitcoin here, but especially with basically a cycle theorist on Bitcoin with the halvening and stuff. I don't see any reason that the historical trend necessarily breaks yet. It may extend a little bit with all of the institutional money, and we may not have as drastic of a pullback. But I still believe Bitcoin at some point in the next 2 years, and probably less than that, maybe 18 months, will probably lose 50% of its value again, and we'll have an extended bear market. So and then that's when people like you and I dollar cost average throughout that typically. Not speaking for you, but I think you do probably dollar cost average, and we end up better off in the end, because eventually we start over again. But in stocks specifically, I just think that everything is like way off whack. Like you look at Tesla, what Tesla's valuation is insane. These companies have insane evaluations or valuations, and I wouldn't be speculating anything involved with personally with Elon Musk, or what he's up to with what I just saw the article he was tweeting about SpaceX maybe going under. So it just seems like there's a lot of like bad news out there right now that could be that sort of catalyst.
Of course, timing it is always difficult. So there's really like no reason to even try. So like I'm really interested in like cash flow. Like I want to like increase cash flow and then hold commodities in such a way to where their fluctuations don't affect me so much. And I think that is just part of life,
Right.
the fluctuations, but it's key to get the cash flow. Now so those are two different like problems to solve, or just two different, um, I guess, strategies towards building wealth. On the Tesla front, that's like clearly a brand play. People are investing in these stocks because they're interested in the brand. They're maybe interested in Elon Musk, and like, are the fundamentals there? I don't know. There's so much government money going into these companies that it's tough to know if they're even like cash flow positive. I mean, how much of MicroStrategy's profits were from Bitcoin? How much, like, what percentage of their overall revenue was from Bitcoin? And same with Tesla. At the end of the day, how much of it was from maybe public money or from Bitcoin investments? SpaceX might be even better example on that front. Like, SpaceX is losing money. So you're investing in a company that's losing money, and it's never proven itself to be able to be cash flow positive. We look at San Francisco, the Silicon Valley model. I learned a lot about the Silicon Valley model in 2016 and 17 during the ICO days, because it really took a lot from the venture capital model with the crowd funding aspect. And that, I believe, is perhaps also a product of the easy, cheap money environment. They're printing so much money that you're able to raise money for startups. You know, it's easier, as I saw will.i.am say recently, to raise money for artificial intelligence than it is for human intelligence. And I believe that's a product of there just being too much easy money in the system. So it's taking bigger risks. It's able to take bigger risks, which of course puts us in a tenuous situation like we find ourselves today, where you do have situations like, for instance, with Dogecoin, where it went from under 1 cent to 80 cents, now it's at 21 cents. And that collapse was driven by a news event, essentially, Elon's appearance on Saturday Night Live. And the reason why that stuff is made possible, I think, largely is because of the easy money environment of the Fed. Now, you might argue, like, look, Dogecoin might not be a bad play if Elon Musk actually works with developers and brings some added functionality to that platform, which might not be impossible. Ethereum's essentially doing that. And then now you all of a sudden you've got a whole different value proposition, whereas you're able to buy Dogecoin when its value proposition is meme coin. And then it transitions into being like a smart contracting platform. That's possible.
I understand that. I don't completely agree just because of the tokenomics, but I do understand what you're saying.
The
That
infinite amount of tokens, the infinite
right,
amount of
right,
money, right?
right.
And so I've learning that so many people do not actually understand that.
Yeah.
They message me and they're like, so when's my Dogecoin going to go up again? And I'm like, I always know where to start. I'm like, so FYI, just so you know, there's a finite amount of Bitcoin, 21 million, that will ever be mined. And Dogecoin has an infinite supply. So these are like two completely different value propositions. So whereas one has been bore out, the Bitcoin value proposition, a truly finite commodity, the Dogecoin play has not actually, that thesis has not played out in such a way to where I would be convinced that it is that now with Dogecoin, that any sort of thesis will play out on the Dogecoin front. So it's like a cash, internet cash, it's infinite supply. I hesitate because I'm looking at Ethereum now, and Ethereum has also had an infinite supply. However, now there's talks that benevolent dictator Vitalik might cap it. So there's two things there. For one, that has massive implications for the price of Ethereum. I think it should also have massive implications for the securities categorization of Ethereum, Ether. But thirdly, it's like, what? Who? Some guy can change the tokenomics. He can change the game theory on a whim. So now we're like looking at, there's Bitcoin and the Bitcoin example, and you can't necessarily assume that similar theses will play out for the rest of the altcoins.
I totally agree with what you just said. Pretty much everything. Ethereum. I don't view Ether as money. They're doing something different. I know there is the ETH is money hashtag or whatever group people on Twitter that do believe ETH is money, but for the reason that you just stated, it's centralized and has some. Well, it has the same sort of methodological or whatever you want to call it problems that just structural problems that central banks have. There's somebody in charge virtually. So, and they did roll back the chain once. So, and Bitcoin's done something similar once too. We don't have to go all the way down that road, but the Ethereum clearly has a lot of utility. Dogecoin I just view as like this completely speculative vehicle that, and then you add on like, and people saw that cash grab is what I view it as, by Elon, or who, I don't want to say Elon, but maybe whoever was really pumping that market, because there was billions of dollars flowing into that market pretty quickly. Didn't make sense to me necessarily. And then you saw the rise of Shiba Inu, which is like 100 trillion tokens off the bat, and infinite supply as well. So, but at least they had like a DEX. I think they built a DEX. I never used it, but I heard they had a DEX. But yeah, so there's these projects that are obviously like also sort of these like things that really, there's just so much money that I guess economic education, we go back to that because that's how we started in this, and we've talked about it throughout. To understand like how to value these projects in crypto and overall really the blockchain sector, you really have to have some sort of economic education. And I think that's really like where the Bitcoin maximalists have gone wrong too, because I feel like they kind of came in and they have really just they're kind of like gang members. And what is a gang? A gang is a centralized group. You're centralizing your group basically. You're saying, hey, nothing else is worth my time. The market can't be right about these other things like Solana or Ethereum, or they have no utility. Like that to me is just absolutely insane. That is like the most irrational point of view. And I just don't understand how people can view how people can go so wrong on that.
I think not to speak for Bitcoin, but I believe the like more accurate economic position would be, doesn't matter what Bitcoiners think. All that matters is what the market thinks. So
Right.
that will bear out, in our opinion, means nothing.
Well, you don't, do you consider yourself a Bitcoin maximalist?
For fun,
Okay.
but not really. My position is exactly as I just stated. These are different value propositions,
Right.
and the market will decide what works and what doesn't. In my opinion, doesn't matter.
I love it. Yeah. And this is just us two guys on a podcast talking about, what we feel about, or how we view it all. But they definitely have different utility. Like Bitcoin is the ultra sound money, the best money in the history of the world, in my opinion. I really believe that. I think and I know gold is tried and tested, so you could put it right up there. But those two, there's no way that you can even like compare anything else to those two, in my opinion. And but I just think it's bad of these of the maxis on Twitter to discount like where in my opinion most of the economic growth can come to acquire Bitcoin. Like we can, that's where the free market's going to be born, on Solana, on Ethereum, these DeFi plays where you can gain crazy amounts of interest. I don't care if you're doing risky plays or not. If you want to throw the Hail Mary and then you roll that into Bitcoin, you can change your life, as a store of value or whatever. And like I said, not financial advice, but I just know that's what a lot of people are doing. So if we really want to grow, we really want to have economic growth across the world. And that's really, I think, somebody like you and I think that's important to us, seeing the entire world get better and prosper. I don't think you go wrong with smart contracts are going to be a huge part of our life. I think discounting how important they're going to be is a major misstep. And I just don't know how somebody could, and just on pure speculation terms, how somebody could look at something like Solana that's up 10,700% or whatever this year compared to Bitcoin that's up 190% and say, the guy who's in Solana doesn't know what he's doing. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting. Everybody has their own sort of risk. Bitcoin's proven risk tolerance. Bitcoin is much more proven and resilient. And we know we don't know, but we have a good feeling about the future of it withstanding. So it's going to be really fun. I just can't wait to see how this decade plays out, because we're living through the greatest economic experiment in the history of the world, probably right now.
It's probably one of the most intense decades in the history of the world as well. So
Absolutely.
a couple of things that you brought to mind for me are that I hear people, for instance, say that like, I believe the argument is Bitcoin is not money because it's not programmable. However, programmability is not one of the features of money historically.
Right.
It's like durability, portability, divisibility, uniformity, limited supply, and acceptability. And I'm reading this off of the St. Louis Fed website. So programmability, this is like a pretty new concept, actually. I guess, it's almost like a central planning esque for my framework to be saying like, oh, well, the dollar's programmable, the bureaucrats program it. However, that's like not a characteristic of money. It's a characteristic of a Keynesian based like monetary system, which is not necessarily the only monetary system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing to bring up. I actually think I wrote about this in a Medium blog once. The program, whether the program Bitcoin not being programmable makes it less money as something like Ethereum or one of these other ones. I take the more historical. If I want sound money, I would take the more historical route there. And say what you just noted, that the 5 properties of sound money, you already listed them off, but yeah, that's been a pretty good measuring stick or metric or whatever for what has been money over time. So I don't see any reason to add programmability to that list, but it's an interesting way to think about it. Maybe if Ethereum would have gotten the monetary supply. Well, here's the thing. Ethereum's founder was always out in the open, so it doesn't have that sort of pseudonymous aspect that Bitcoin has. So it was always going to be more centralized, no matter what, unless Vitalik would have started as an anonymous or pseudonymous figure as well. But from just the pure tokenomics standpoint and programmability, I think that Bitcoin is, I don't think it needs to be programmable. And I actually think them trying to build on top of it is proof that I just think that there's a lot of money grabs going on the side chains and stuff like that on Bitcoin. Like you can't have it both ways. You can't say smart contracts are basically worthless or they're only good on Bitcoin. That just is kind of, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think that I think probably all of those projects will, maybe not all, to be hyperbolic again, but the majority of like the side chains on Bitcoin will die. I hope they do die, because I think Bitcoin is money and a store of value, and it still works well as money. I still use it as money every week. I might be one of the only ones, but I do use it as money every single week still. So I actually enjoy the gold narrative, because it's made it rather cheap. This time in the cycle 3 years ago, or it was 2017, 4 years ago, it was actually pretty expensive to use. And it's interesting that it's actually quite a bit cheaper today to send on chain than it was in 2017. And then you see Ethereum, on the other hand, has gotten quite a bit more expensive. So I think these things are going to be, just one last thing, I think these things are going to be in like a constant process, like in the early days of the internet, of scaling. So none of the and that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. It doesn't have to really scale. It's just money. It's a store of value. These other things are in a constant scaling process.
Yeah, you made me think about the Bitcoin block size debate. And I'm like, man, does the block size not matter? Just the fact that there's only going to ever be 21 million Bitcoins ever. And it's the only commodity on the planet that has a finite amount, where we know to a T how many there will exist, and the supply pattern. Was the block size debate like literally just axiomatically economically incorrect? I mean, it might be, because maybe it was a moot point. There's only 21 million Bitcoins. I think the counter argument to that would be that it's divisible to the 8th decimal place.
Right.
However, that's neither here nor there. We've had the great honor and privilege of sitting down with R.L Bryer today on this episode of the Gold Silver Bitcoin Show. rlbryer.io. Where else can people find you?
That's actually rl@bryer.io if you want to send me an email, but the website is bryer.io. Yeah, that's right. And then if you want to add me on Twitter, it's @rbryer23. And I also have a Patreon where I try to do my best to educate people on Austrian economics and how I intertwine them with Bitcoin and freedom and the markets and stuff. And that's patreon.com/RL Bryer if you guys want to check that out too. So I appreciate you having me on again, Justin.
Pleasure's all mine. And thank you everyone for listening.